10 elite doctors fail to deliver a Korean mafia boss's heir. The baby is dying, the mother is fading, and desperation fills the underground hospital. Then a poor black cleaner speaks up. The doctors laugh. Until she does what none of them could. Trained as a midwife in war-torn Nigeria, trafficked to Seoul, reduced to mopping floors, Amara Johnson's knowledge was overlooked but never lost. In 30 seconds, she saves a life and shatters every assumption about power, wisdom, and who truly deserves respect. Hey family, welcome to Real Life Hot Stories. Please subscribe and give this video a like. It truly means the world to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thank you so much for the support. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. The fluorescent lights in the underground hospital flickered once, then steadied, casting harsh shadows across sterile white walls. 300 feet beneath the glittering streets of Seoul, where ordinary citizens shopped for designer bags and sipped overpriced coffee in glass towers that touched the clouds, a woman screamed. Not just any woman. The wife of Young Tae-min, the man who controlled half of South Korea's underground economy, with a phone call and a nod. The man whose name made politicians sweat through their pressed shirts and CEOs reconsider their business decisions in the middle of sleepless nights. The man who had never, in 47 years of breathing, living, conquering, felt truly powerless. Until tonight. Move faster. Taemin's voice cracked like a whip through the sterile corridors, echoing off concrete walls built to withstand anything except the sound of his wife's agony. His tailored Tom Ford suit, midnight blue, $3,000, fitted perfectly just yesterday, was wrinkled for the first time in a decade. His salt and pepper hair, usually slicked back with precision, fell across his forehead in disheveled strands from running his hands through it repeatedly. Behind him, 6 bodyguards stood with hands hovering near concealed weapons, their faces masks of professional tension. They'd been trained to handle armed assaults, kidnapping attempts, coordinated attacks from rival families. None of their training had prepared them for this, their boss pacing like a caged animal, powerless before the mystery of birth. Inside the delivery room, chaos masqueraded as expertise. Dr. Kim Jae-won, chief of obstetrics at Seoul National University Hospital, adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses with trembling fingers and studied the monitor with mounting concern that tightened his chest like a vice. Around him, 9 other doctors crowded the space. The best money could buy, each one pulled from their beds with promises of compensation that could fund a retirement villa in Jeju Island. Dr. Park Soo-jin, 42, who'd trained at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Choi Min-ho, 35, who'd published papers on complicated deliveries in The Lancet. Dr. Yoon, Dr. Han, Dr. Lee, surnames that commanded respect in Seoul's medical circles, faces that appeared in magazine spreads about healthcare excellence. Fetal heart rate is dropping, announced Dr. Park, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead and sliding down her temples. 120, 115, 110. The numbers fell like dominoes, each one stealing breath from the room. Mrs. Young writhed on the table, her carefully maintained composure, perfected through years of standing beside a man the world feared, dissolved into raw animal pain. Her manicured nails, painted shell pink just 3 days ago in preparation for a charity gala she'd never attend, dug into the leather armrests hard enough to leave crescents that would scar the material. Please, she gasped between contractions that ripped through her body like earthquakes. Please save my baby. Please, I'm begging you. Her voice broke on the last word, dissolving into a sob that made even the hardened bodyguards shift uncomfortably outside the observation window. Dr. Kim's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. He'd delivered over 3,000 babies in his 27-year career. He'd been featured in medical journals, his picture smiling confidently beside articles with titles like Innovations in High-Risk Obstetrics and Managing Complicated Deliveries. He'd been consulted by royal families, flown first class to Dubai to deliver the children of oil magnates, given lectures at conferences where younger doctors hung on his every word. But standing in this underground fortress, watching the security cameras track his every move with unblinking red eyes, feeling the weight of the Mafia boss's stare burning through the observation window like a laser, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 20 years. Pure, undiluted fear. Start prep for an emergency C-section, he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of decades. Get the surgical team ready now. Wait, Dr. Choi interjected, stepping forward with the aggressive confidence of youth. He was younger, ambitious, with a reputation for solving impossible cases that older doctors gave up on. His Instagram featured photos of him in scrubs, #SavingLives, followers in the hundreds of thousands. We can manually rotate the baby. I've done it 7 times before. Successfully. And risk uterine rupture? Dr. Kim snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut. Are you insane? Do you understand what happens if we... Are you scared? Choi fired back, his ego too large for the room. Or just old? The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Several nurses stopped moving entirely, frozen by the confrontation. Through the observation window, Taemin pressed his palm against the glass, his knuckles white as bone, jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped beneath his ear. His second-in-command, Min-soo, stood beside him, phone in hand, ready to make calls that would either celebrate life or arrange funerals. He'd done both before, knew the difference in his boss's breathing. Boss, Min-soo said quietly, choosing his words with surgical precision, perhaps we should call the American doctor from Johns Hopkins. The one who consulted on the prime ministers. There's no time, Taemin interrupted, his voice hollow, scraped raw. He watched his wife convulse with another contraction, watched her back arch off the table, watched the line on the monitor dip lower, lower, lower. There's no time for anything. There's no time. He'd built an empire on controlling time, deadlines, schedules, knowing exactly when to strike and when to wait. But time didn't care about his power. Time was killing his wife and son, and all his money, all his connections, all his feared name couldn't buy him one more second. In the corner of the room, invisible to the arguing doctors and their expensive equipment worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, Amara Johnson pushed her mop across blood-stained tiles. Back and forth, the rhythm as familiar as breathing. The bucket beside her mixed pink with each dip and squeeze, creating swirls that reminded her of sunsets over Lagos before the war came. Before the traffickers came. Before everything she was got reduced to this. A shadow cleaning up the messes of people who never looked at her face, never asked her name, never wondered if she had a story worth knowing. She was 37 but looked 50. Years of sleeping on concrete floors and eating 1 meal a day, whatever she could afford after the labor broker took his cut, had carved hollows in her cheeks and put silver in her hair that should still be black. Her uniform, a donated set of scrubs 2 sizes too large, faded from too many washings, hung off her thin frame like a tent. Her hands, rough and scarred from chemicals and labor, gripped the mop handle with the muscle memory of 1,000 shifts, 10,000 hours of making herself small, invisible, acceptable. But her eyes were watching everything. They tracked Mrs. Young's contractions, noting the intervals, the intensity, the way her body tensed and released. They observed the baby's positioning through the subtle movements of the swollen belly, reading signs that machines couldn't translate into beeping numbers. They catalogued the doctor's increasing panic, the way their confident expertise crumbled under pressure like sand castles meeting the tide. Pressure's dropping. A nurse's panicked voice cut through the arguing doctors like a siren. Systolic at 85. Patient is becoming hypotensive. Dr. Kim made his decision with the desperation of a drowning man reaching for anything solid. We're doing the C-section now. Prep the operating field, get anesthesia ready, someone call the surgical team. The positioning is wrong, Amara said. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, accented with the rolling tones of West Africa. Igbo and English mixed together in her throat, creating a melody that Seoul's harsh consonants had never quite erased. But in the sudden spike of panic, in the brief pause between the nurse's alarm and the doctor's response, it carried. Every head turned. Dr. Kim looked at her as if she'd materialized from thin air, as if the furniture had spoken, as if reality had hiccuped. Excuse me. His tone wasn't quite dismissive yet, just confused, his brain struggling to process why the cleaner was making sounds that sounded like medical observation. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought they might hear it. 20 years ago, she would have spoken with confidence, with the authority of someone who'd delivered 200 babies in villages without electricity, who'd learned from her grandmother's hands. Knowledge passed down through 7 generations of women who caught babies and saved mothers. Who'd earned respect through results rather than diplomas hanging on walls. But that was before. Before Seoul. Before the basement room she shared with 11 other undocumented workers, sleeping on mats laid side by side with no space between, breathing each other's air, dreaming each other's nightmares. Before learning that her midwife training meant nothing without papers, without Korean, without the right skin color in a country that barely acknowledged she existed. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. Because what happens in the next few minutes will change everything you think you know about power and respect. I said. Dr. Kim's voice rose, hardening into the tone he used with medical students who dared question his judgment. Excuse me. The baby is posterior, Amara continued, forcing herself to take half a step forward, her knuckles tight around the mop handle like it was an anchor keeping her from floating away. Back of the head against the spine. Occiput posterior position. That's why labor stopped progressing. That's why the heart rate drops with each contraction. The compression on the spine. Dr. Choi laughed, a sharp, dismissive bark that made several nurses flinch. And you determined this how? By mopping the floor? Did the blood spell it out for you? A few nervous titters from the younger residents. They'd been taught in medical school that knowledge came from textbooks and professors, from peer-reviewed journals and clinical trials. Not from janitors. Never from the invisible people who cleaned their messes. By watching the contractions, Amara pressed on, her voice gaining strength despite the mockery, despite the stares. By listening to her breathing. By seeing how the baby moves, or doesn't move, with each push. By. Get her out of here, Dr. Kim commanded, waving his hand dismissively as he turned back to his team. Security. Remove this woman immediately. This is a sterile medical environment, not a... Wait. The word crackled through the intercom from the observation room, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Through the observation window, Taemin's eyes tracked the exchange. He watched the cleaner, truly looked at her for the first time since she'd been assigned to this hospital 3 months ago, and saw something in her stillness that reminded him of his own grandmother. The woman who'd raised him in the slums of Busan, who'd taught him that survival meant seeing what others missed, that power came from knowing things others overlooked. Mr. Young, Dr. Kim said through gritted teeth, trying to maintain professional composure, with all due respect, this woman is a cleaner. She has no medical training, no certification, no qualification to even speak in this room. She's... My wife is dying, Taemin cut him off, each word dropping like a stone into still water, sending ripples through every person in the room. My child is dying. And in the last 30 minutes, 10 experts with enough degrees to wallpaper this hospital have accomplished nothing except argue about whose ego is more important than my family. So yes, Dr. Kim, I will listen to the fucking cleaner. And so will you. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath, waiting. Amara's hands trembled violently. She set the mop carefully against the wall, leaving a wet streak on the pristine paint, and moved closer to the table. Her rubber cleaning gloves still dripped with diluted blood and disinfectant, leaving drops on the floor she'd just cleaned. Mrs. Young's eyes found hers, dark, desperate, drowning in fear. Please, Mrs. Young whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. Please help me. I don't care who you are. I need someone to save my baby. Please. Amara looked down at this woman who wore diamond earrings worth more than Amara would earn in 10 lifetimes, whose silk maternity gown probably cost more than the fake passport that had brought Amara to this country. And she saw past all of it, past the wealth and the power and the privilege, to something universal, something that transcended borders and money and status. A mother. Terrified for her child. The same look she'd seen in her own mother's eyes when Boko Haram came to their village. The same look she'd worn when they took blessing from her arms in that warehouse in Libya. The same look she'd seen on 1,000 women's faces across Nigeria and Niger and Chad. Women screaming in languages she did and didn't speak, but all saying the same thing, save my baby, please God, save my baby. The baby needs to rotate 90 degrees, Amara said, her voice growing steadier with each word, muscle memory taking over. But not with force. Not with instruments. Not with the aggressive manipulation that will cause the uterus to tear. With positioning, with pressure, with patience. With listening to what the body is trying to tell us. This is insane, Dr. Park protested, but her voice lacked conviction. She'd been watching the monitors, watching her colleagues argue, feeling the creeping dread that came with knowing they were losing a patient and having no solution. "We can't let an unqualified." The monitor screamed. A high-pitched alarm that stabbed through the tension like a knife. Mrs. Young's blood pressure plummeted. The fetal heart rate dropped to 90 beats per minute, then 85, then 80. "She has maybe 3 minutes, Dr. Kim said, his face ashen, all his bravado evaporating as he stared at numbers he couldn't fix. "Maybe less. We need to start the C-section now or we're going to lose both of them. We need to." "Let her try." Taemin's voice came through the intercom, quiet now, almost broken. The voice of a man watching his entire world hang by a thread. "Let her try." Dr. Kim looked at his colleagues, at the lawyers who would inevitably come with their briefcases and their depositions, at the career he'd built brick by brick on reputation and results. A career that would end if this went wrong. Then he looked at the failing monitors, at the woman dying on his table, at the baby that wouldn't survive another 5 minutes. And he stepped back. "You have 1 minute," he said to Amara, pulling a timer from his pocket, setting it with shaking fingers. 60 seconds. Then I'm cutting regardless of what happens. 1 minute. The timer started. The seconds began their countdown. Tick, tick, tick. Amara moved to Mrs. Young's side. She'd removed her cleaning gloves and scrubbed her hands with surgical soap. Muscle memory from a life before this one, from Lagos University Teaching Hospital where she'd trained, from the refugee camps where soap was a luxury but life was everything. Her hands, dark and scarred against Mrs. Young's pale skin, hovered over the swollen belly, feeling for heat, for tension, for the story the body was telling. "Listen to me," Amara said softly in broken Korean, then switched to English when Mrs. Young nodded understanding. "I need you to breathe with me. Not fast. Not the panicked breathing. Slow. Like waves on the beach. Like you're pulling the ocean into your lungs. In and out." "I can't," Mrs. Young sobbed, her whole body shaking. "It hurts too much. I'm so tired. I can't." "Yes, you can." Amara's hands pressed gently on the belly's left side, feeling for the hardness that indicated the baby's back, mapping the geography of new life trapped in the wrong position. "Because you're not just fighting for breath right now. You're fighting for your child. And mothers. Mothers can do impossible things when they must. I know this. I've seen it 1,000 times." Mrs. Young's eyes locked onto Amara's, finding something there. Some ancient knowing, some wordless understanding that passed between women across all barriers of language and class and country and color. The recognition that in this moment, they were both just mothers fighting for life. "Breathe," Amara commanded gently, her voice carrying the authority of generations. "Now." Mrs. Young breathed. In and out. In and out. Her chest rose and fell in rhythm with Amara's words. Amara's hands worked with precision that startled the watching doctors into stillness. She applied pressure in a specific sequence. Not the pushing and prodding they'd learned in medical school, but something older, something that came from generations of women helping women bring life into harsh worlds. Her fingers found pressure points that textbooks didn't name, points her grandmother had taught her by firelight, saying, "Here, feel this? This is where the baby tells you what it needs." She positioned Mrs. Young's hips in a way that seemed awkward but created space in the birth canal, opened pathways that modern obstetrics had forgotten. 30 seconds, Dr. Kim warned, his hand on the scalpel, his voice tight with fear and fascination. Half of him wanted to push her aside. Half of him was desperate to see if this could possibly work. Amara ignored him. She was in Lagos again, in her grandmother's hut with the corrugated tin roof that drummed with rain, watching wrinkled hands guide a breech baby into the world by candlelight and prayer. She was in the refugee camp in Niger, delivering twins with nothing but clean cloth and sheer determination. She was in the back of a truck fleeing Boko Haram, helping a woman give birth while bullets sang overhead. She was in every moment her knowledge had been dismissed, every time she'd been told her experience meant nothing without the right papers, the right language, the right color skin. And she was here. Now. With a woman who needed her. "Push," Amara said. "Not hard. Gentle. Like you're hugging your baby closer to you, pulling him toward your heart." But the doctors said. I am not asking you to listen to doctors right now. Amara's voice carried quiet authority, the voice of someone who'd faced death too many times to fear judgment. I'm asking you to listen to your body. To trust what your body knows. Your body was made for this. Women have been doing this for thousands of years before hospitals existed. Push. Mrs. Jung pushed. A gentle, controlled push that seemed wrong to everyone watching. Everyone except Amara, who felt the baby shift beneath her hands. A quarter turn. Then half. The tiny body rotating slowly, finding the path forward. The fetal heart rate held steady at 80. Not rising, but not falling either. Holding onto life by its fingernails. 15 seconds, Dr. Kim said, his voice tight. We're out of time. Again, Amara instructed, her hands adjusting pressure, guiding without forcing. Same breath. Same gentle push. Tell your baby it's safe to come. Tell him you're ready. Mrs. Jung's face contorted with effort. Sweat poured down her temples. The monitors beeped faster, an orchestra of panic. Alarms started to sound. 1, then 2, then 3 machines screaming that something was wrong. Time's up. Dr. Choi shouted, reaching for instruments. We need to cut now. We need to. And then. A shift. Subtle but unmistakable. The baby rotated into the correct position, the back of its head facing forward, ready to enter the world the way nature intended. The heart rate climbed. 85. 90. 100. 110. Oh my God, Dr. Park breathed, staring at the monitor like it had performed magic. It's working. The baby is turning. How is this? One more, Amara said, her hands supporting, encouraging, her voice filled with the confidence of someone who'd done this enough times to know when life was about to triumph. The hardest one. The one that brings your baby home. Mrs. Jung screamed, not in agony now, but in effort, in determination, in the primal power of every woman who'd ever pushed life into the world against impossible odds. Her fingers found Amara's hand and squeezed until bones ground together, until Amara's fingers went numb, but she didn't pull away. She held on, sharing the pain, sharing the effort. And the baby came. Not with the drama of television shows or the clinical efficiency of scheduled C-sections. Not with the fanfare of instruments and surgical lights. Just came. Slippery and purple and screaming with indignant fury at being forced from the warm darkness into the bright lights, tiny fists waving at the injustice of it all. It's a boy, Dr. Kim whispered, his hands instinctively taking the baby to suction and clean, his years of training overriding his shock. A healthy boy. APGAR score. 7 at 1 minute. 8. 9. Perfect. He's perfect. The delivery room erupted. Nurses moved with purpose, doctors checked vitals with trembling hands, machines beeped with the steady rhythm of life continuing, disaster averted, crisis overcome. Through it all, Amara stood still, her hands still clasped in Mrs. Jung's, her breath coming in shaky gasps as adrenaline drained away and left her hollow. Mrs. Jung looked up at her, tears streaming down her face, mixing with sweat and the exhaustion that came from pushing a human being into existence. Thank you, she mouthed in English, her voice too raw for sound. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat the size of a fist. She started to step back, to return to her mop and bucket and the comfortable invisibility of her cleaning role, to disappear back into the shadows where people like her belonged. But Mrs. Jung's grip tightened, refusing to let go. No, Mrs. Jung said, finding her voice. Don't go. Please. Don't go. I want to know your name. I need to know your name. Amara, she whispered, her voice breaking on her own name. My name is Amara Johnson. The door burst open. Taemin entered like a storm, like a force of nature, his bodyguards trailing behind like satellites. His eyes swept the room with the intensity of a man who'd just watched his entire world almost disappear. The baby in Dr. Kim's arms, his wife alive and breathing, and the thin black woman in oversized scrubs standing beside the delivery table like an avenging angel wrapped in humility. He stopped. Stared. And for the first time in decades, Jung Taemin felt the weight of his own ignorance, his own blindness, his own failure to see what had been in front of him all along. You, he said, his voice rough as gravel. You saved them. Amara ducked her head, instinct taking over, 20 years of making herself small. The doctors. The doctors did nothing, Taemin interrupted, his voice cutting through her deflection like a blade. He turned to Dr. Kim, his eyes cold. You. Chief of Obstetrics. 10 million won per year salary. 30 years of experience. Featured in magazines. Consultant to the rich and powerful. And you were about to let my wife and son die because you couldn't admit a cleaner might know something you don't. Dr. Kim's face flushed red, shame and anger warring across his features. Mr. Jung, I assure you, we were following proper medical protocol. Your protocol was killing them, Taemin said flatly. Get out. All of you. Out of my sight. The doctors filed out in silence, their expensive shoes clicking against the tile like a retreat, their heads down, their pride shattered. Only Dr. Park paused at the door, looking back at Amara with something like respect, or maybe wonder, in her eyes before leaving. When they were gone, when only the nurses remained to clean up and monitor vitals, Taemin approached Amara slowly. His bodyguards tensed, they'd never seen their boss's hands shake before. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet, extracting a stack of bills that would have equaled 6 months of Amara's salary, more money than she'd held in her hands since leaving Nigeria. Thank you, he said, extending the money with both hands in the traditional gesture of respect. For my son's life. For my wife's life. For everything. Amara looked at the cash. Then at his face. Then at the baby now resting peacefully in Mrs. Jung's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling with the rhythm of breathing, of living, of existing. I don't want money, she said quietly. Taemin's eyebrows rose. In his world, everyone wanted money. Money was power, was safety, was the universal language that opened every door. Everyone wants money. Not everyone, Amara replied, her voice gaining strength as she found her footing in this surreal moment. She was tired, so tired her bones ached, so tired she could barely stand, but something in her had awakened. Something that had been sleeping since the traffickers had stolen her passport in Dubai, since she'd been sold to a labor broker in Seoul, since she'd learned that her degrees and her training and her knowledge meant nothing without documentation. I want to be seen. If you're still watching, drop a comment below telling me what you think happens next. And if this story is making you feel something, hit that like button. Because we're about to discover who this woman really is, and it's going to change everything. Scene. Taemin repeated the word slowly, as if tasting it for the first time, as if it was a concept he'd never considered in all his years of commanding respect through fear. I am not just a cleaner, Amara said, her voice gaining strength with each word, years of silence breaking like a dam that could no longer hold back the flood. I was a midwife. In Nigeria. I trained at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, 4 years of formal education, 2 years of residency. I have delivered 347 babies. I kept count, wrote each one in my journal. 347 lives that came into this world through my hands. The words tumbled out now, unstoppable, like blood from a wound finally allowed to bleed clean. I worked in refugee camps in Niger and Chad when the war came. No electricity, no running water, no backup if something went wrong. Just me and other women and our knowledge passed down from grandmother to grandmother. I saved lives when there were no machines, no monitors, no rich people to pay for the best equipment. I saved lives with nothing but my hands and what I knew. Mrs. Jung watched from the bed, her baby at her breast, tears still flowing down her cheeks. The nurses had stopped their cleaning, frozen by the raw honesty spilling into the room. And then. Taemin prompted quietly, something in her story catching him, holding him still. And then the war came to my village. Boko Haram. Amara's eyes were distant, seeing things she'd tried to forget, memories she'd buried under years of survival. You know this name? Taemin nodded slowly. He knew evil when he heard it named. They killed my husband. Shot him in front of me because he tried to stop them from taking the young girls. Burned our clinic. Our beautiful clinic where we'd delivered so many babies, where we'd saved so many mothers. Burned it to the ground and laughed while it burned. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. I ran with my daughter, My blessing. She was 5 years old, still believed in goodness and safety and tomorrow. Ran all the way to Libya through countries I can't even name anymore. Met men who promised to take us to Europe. Better life, they said. Safety, they said. Hope, they said. She laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. They took my daughter. Said she would work to pay for passage. Said I would see her in Italy. Handed her to a man with dead eyes and drove away while she screamed for me. 7 years now. 7 years, and I still hear her voice in my dreams. Still see her reaching for me. Still wake up thinking I can save her if I just run fast enough. The room was silent except for the soft sounds of the baby's breathing, innocent of the horrors being named around him. They brought me here instead, Amara continued, her voice hollow now. Seoul. Gave me fake papers with someone else's name. Put me in a room with other women like me, Filipino, Vietnamese, Mongolian, Indonesian. All of us invisible. All of us working jobs nobody wants, living in places nobody sees, hoping nobody asks too many questions. The labor broker takes most of our money. Says we owe for the travel, for the papers, for the privilege of breathing Korean air. She looked down at her hands, scarred rough, the hands of someone who'd worked hard for every scrap of survival. But my knowledge, that they cannot take. Every day I clean this hospital, I watch. I see the doctors make mistakes. Simple mistakes. Things my grandmother would have caught with one touch. Babies positioned wrong. Mothers not dilated enough. Equipment reading incorrectly. And I say nothing. Because what am I? Just a cleaner. Just an illegal. Just a black woman in a country that pretends we don't exist unless we're on TV, singing or playing sports, entertaining them. Taemin was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable. Minsu stood by the door, his usual stoic expression cracked by something that looked like shame. The shame of never questioning, never looking deeper, never wondering about the stories of the invisible people who cleaned his office. What is your daughter's name? Taemin asked finally, his voice softer than anyone in the room had ever heard it. Blessing Amara Johnson. Blessing God knows. Amara's voice broke on her daughter's name. She would be 12 now. Almost a teenager. If she's alive. If she couldn't finish the sentence. The possibility that Blessing was dead, sold into worse things than she could imagine, was too large to speak aloud. Taemin turned to Minsu. Find her. Minsu blinked, uncertain he'd heard correctly. Boss. You heard me. Use every contact we have. Nigeria, Libya, Europe, North Africa, the Mediterranean routes, everywhere. Find this woman's daughter. Put our best people on it. Money is no object. Time is no object. Find her. That could take months. Years. She might be. Then take years, Taemin said flatly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. And while you're at it, find the labor broker who holds her papers. The one who takes her money, keeps her trapped. I want to have a very long, very detailed conversation with him about his business practices and his continued existence. Minsu nodded and left, already pulling out his phone, already making calls that would set an entire network in motion. A network usually used for finding enemies, now repurposed to find one lost girl in a world that swallowed people whole. Taemin turned back to Amara. You said you want to be seen. Fine. You're seen. But now we talk about what happens next, because this, he gestured to the room, to the baby, to everything that had just happened, this changes things. I don't understand, Amara said, bewildered by the sudden shift in her reality. You saved my son's life. My wife's life. In my world, that creates a debt that can never be fully repaid. Not with money. Not with favors. But I can try. He gestured to his wife and baby. This child, he will grow up knowing that the most important moment of his life, the moment he drew his first breath, came because of a woman the world told him to ignore. A woman without papers or status or the right color skin. He will grow up knowing that wisdom doesn't always wear a white coat. Mrs. Jung nodded, crying again, her emotions too large for her body. Please, she said to Amara in halting English, each word carefully chosen. Will you be his godmother? Will you watch over him? Amara's legs almost gave out. She reached for the wall to steady herself. I care about the fact that you are the reason my son is alive. I care about the fact that when doctors with all their degrees and machines and confidence failed, you succeeded with nothing but your hands and your heart and your courage. Taemin stepped closer to Amara, and she instinctively stepped back. Decades of being taught to avoid powerful men, to make herself small, to never assume she belonged in their space. But he didn't reach for her, didn't threaten. Instead, he did something that made every bodyguard in the hallway shift uncomfortably, something that would be talked about in Seoul's underworld for years. He bowed. A full, deep bow of respect, the kind reserved for elders and honored teachers in Korean culture, the kind that acknowledged superiority of wisdom and spirit. "Thank you," he said simply, his forehead nearly touching his knees. "For reminding me that power means nothing without wisdom. That money cannot buy what truly matters. That sometimes the most important person in the room is the one everyone's been trained not to see." Amara stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. This man, this terrifying crime lord whose name made politicians nervous and CEOs reconsider their alliances, was bowing to her. Respecting her. Seeing her. "Tomorrow," Taemin said, straightening, his eyes meeting hers with the intensity of someone making an unbreakable promise, "you will not mop floors. Tomorrow, Min-soo will take you to an immigration lawyer. The best in Seoul. The one who makes problems disappear like they never existed. We will fix your papers, legitimize your status, make you legal in every way that matters. And then..." He paused, thinking. "Then you will tell me what you want to do." "I want to deliver babies," Amara said immediately, without thinking, the truth coming out before fear could stop it. "I want to help women who are scared and alone. Women in the camps, women like me who fell through the cracks, women whose knowledge is dismissed because of where they're from or what they look like. I want to train other women so they don't lose their knowledge just because they lose their country." Taemin smiled, a rare expression that transformed his harsh features into something almost gentle. "Then that's what you'll do. I'll fund a clinic. You'll run it. No questions asked. No papers required for the women who come to you. A place where being invisible doesn't mean being helpless. A place where every woman matters, regardless of who she is or where she came from." "Why?" Amara whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because 30 minutes ago, I had all the power in the world and none of it mattered. My money couldn't save my son. My connections couldn't save my wife. My fear and my reputation and my ability to make people disappear, all of it was useless. But you, with nothing but your knowledge and your courage, you gave me everything that matters." He looked at his son, now sleeping peacefully, unaware of how close he'd come to never existing. "That deserves more than money. It deserves honor." Dr. Park reappeared at the door, having been listening from the hallway, her face transformed by something between shame and hope. "If Mr. Jung is serious about the clinic," she said hesitantly, her voice small, "I'd like to volunteer. To learn from you. To understand what I've been missing all these years. If you'll have me." Amara felt tears spill down her cheeks. Tears she'd been holding back for 7 years, since the day they took blessing, since the day her world ended. "Yes," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I would be honored." More doctors appeared behind Dr. Park. Younger ones, residents and interns who'd watched through the observation window, who'd seen expertise fail and humility succeed. They looked at Amara not with the dismissive disdain of earlier, but with curiosity, respect, the hunger to learn that separates true healers from mere technicians. "I think," Taemin said quietly, watching the small crowd gather, "that you've started something bigger than either of us expected." The baby woke and cried, not in distress, but with the simple hunger of new life demanding attention, demanding to be fed, demanding to be known. Mrs. Jung adjusted him, fumbling slightly, the universal awkwardness of first-time mothers learning to navigate this new creature they'd created. Amara moved closer instinctively, her hands checking his positioning, her eyes scanning for the subtle signs of distress that mothers often miss in those first confused hours. "Like this," she showed Mrs. Jung gently, her hands guiding without forcing. "Support the head here, let him find the breast himself. Don't try to force him. Babies know more than we think." They've been doing this for thousands of years before hospitals and procedures existed. Trust him to know. Mrs. Jung followed her guidance, and the baby latched successfully, his tiny fist waving with satisfaction, his eyes closing in the bliss of solved hunger. See? Amara smiled, her first genuine smile in years, the kind that reaches the eyes and transforms the face. He knows exactly what to do. We just have to get out of his way sometimes. Let nature do what nature knows. Taemin watched this exchange, watched the woman who'd saved his family teach his wife with the patience of someone who genuinely cared about the outcome, not the paycheck, not the recognition, not the status. He thought about his own grandmother, dead now for 20 years, who'd birthed 7 children in a shack with no running water, no electricity, no pain medication. Who'd known things that no medical school taught. Who'd been dismissed as ignorant by people with degrees who couldn't keep a houseplant alive. My grandmother, he said suddenly, the memory rising like smoke, she used to say that wisdom and education aren't the same thing. That you could have all the books in the world and still not know how to live. Amara looked at him, recognition sparking in her eyes. My grandmother said almost the same words. She said, Amara, the world will try to tell you that paper means more than practice. That certificates matter more than children saved. But when a woman is screaming in labor, your diploma will not deliver her baby. Your hands will. Your knowledge will. Your courage will. Smart women, our grandmothers, Taemin said, his voice carrying the weight of old grief. The smartest, Amara agreed, feeling the connection across cultures, across continents, across the vast divide of their different worlds. The night stretched on. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, administering medications, cleaning up the aftermath of birth that was both miracle and mess. Amara stayed, not because she was asked to, but because something in her needed to witness this new beginning. This moment where a life that could have ended before it began was now crying, feeding, existing in all its demanding, beautiful reality. Min-soo returned near dawn with a tablet showing the first search results, his usual efficiency tinged with something that looked like hope. We found 3 Blessing Johnsons matching the approximate age and origin story, he reported, his voice careful. 2 in Italy, 1 in France. All in questionable situations, labor trafficking, we think. We're verifying identities now, running photos through recognition software, checking with our contacts on the ground. Amara's breath caught in her throat, hope and fear warring for dominance in her chest. Truly? You really found? We're very good at finding people, Min-soo said simply, with the confidence of someone who'd never failed at this particular task. It's what we do. Give us 2 weeks. If she's findable, we'll find her. If she's alive, we'll bring her home. And if she's... Amara couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the nightmare that haunted her every sleeping and waking hour. Then you'll know, Min-soo said gently, his usual coldness softened by something almost human. One way or another you'll know. Not knowing is its own kind of torture. Worse sometimes than knowing the worst. Amara nodded, unable to speak past the hope that was suddenly too large, too bright, too terrifying to name. 7 years of not knowing, 7 years of wondering, 7 years of every dark possibility playing in her mind on endless repeat. And now maybe possibly an answer. Dr. Kim appeared at the door as sunrise began to paint the underground hospital's artificial windows with programmed light. He looked 10 years older than he had 8 hours ago, his shoulders slumped with something heavier than exhaustion, deeper than shame. I came to apologize, he said to Amara, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. And to offer my resignation to Mr. Jung. I don't want your resignation, Taemin said immediately. I want you to learn something. Which is that the moment you think you know everything is the moment you become dangerous to the people who trust you. Taemin looked at his son, at this tiny creature who'd almost died because of pride disguised as expertise. You're a brilliant doctor. Your credentials prove it. Your record proves it. But tonight, your ego almost killed my family. Your refusal to consider that someone without your degrees might know something you don't, that almost ended my bloodline. Dr. Kim flinched but didn't argue, didn't defend. You're right. I was so focused on procedure, on protocol, on what the textbook said, that I missed what was right in front of me. I missed what mattered. We all did, Dr. Park added quietly, stepping into the room with the others. We saw her cleaning the floor, and we decided that was all she was. We never thought to ask who she might have been before she held a mop. We never wondered if her hands remembered other work. It's a common blindness, Amara said, surprising everyone with the lack of bitterness in her voice, with the grace of someone who'd learned that anger was exhausting and forgiveness was survival. I've been guilty of it too, in other ways. We all decide who deserves our attention based on costumes they wear. Clothes, titles, skin color, accents, the languages we speak. We forget that underneath all of it, we're all just humans trying to survive, trying to matter, trying to leave something good behind. That's remarkably gracious, Dr. Kim said, genuine wonder in his voice, considering how we treated you. How I treated you? Amara shrugged. Anger is exhausting. And tonight, I'm too tired to be angry. Tonight, I just want to be grateful that this baby is alive, this mother is safe, and maybe, just maybe, my own daughter might be found. Everything else is small by comparison. The baby chose that moment to burp loudly, startling everyone into laughter that broke the tension like a thunderstorm breaking heat. The sound was so human, so ordinary, so perfectly timed that it felt almost divine, a reminder that life continues, that joy exists even in the aftermath of near tragedy. So, Dr. Park said to Amara, her voice tentative but sincere, when this clinic opens, will you teach us? Really teach us, I mean. Not the textbook stuff we already know, but the wisdom that comes from delivering babies in impossible circumstances. The knowledge that comes from having nothing but your hands and your faith and your experience. If you're willing to learn, Amara replied, meeting her eyes, I'm willing to teach. I think, Dr. Choi added, appearing behind Dr. Park with humility that hadn't existed 8 hours ago, that we should formally request your consultation on difficult cases going forward. If Mr. Jung agrees. If you agree. Taemin waved his hand dismissively. My agreement is irrelevant. Ask her. She's the expert. She proved that tonight. As I close this story, I want you to think about something. How many Amaras do you pass every day without seeing? How many people do you overlook because of what they wear, or where they're from, or what language they speak with what accent? How many miracles are you missing because you decided someone wasn't worth your attention based on their circumstances rather than their capabilities? This isn't just a story about a dramatic birth in an underground hospital. This isn't entertainment meant to pass 20 minutes of your day. It's a reminder urgent and necessary wear a white coat, strength doesn't always speak with a confident accent, and sometimes the person who can save you is the one you've been trained not to see, taught not to acknowledge, conditioned to walk past without a second glance. If this story changed how you see the world even a little bit, if it made you uncomfortable or hopeful or thoughtful or angry, please share it. Hit that like button so this story reaches people who need to hear it. And subscribe, because stories like this, stories about real human dignity, real respect, real recognition of what people are worth beyond their circumstances. These are the stories we need more of. These are the stories that change minds, that open eyes, that make us better. Drop a comment and tell me, who's the Amara in your life? Who's the person everyone overlooks but you know is special? Let's honor them together. Let's see the invisible people in our lives before we need them to save us. Because at the end of the day, power doesn't always wear expensive suits. Wisdom doesn't always speak with authority. Expertise doesn't always come with diplomas on the wall. And sometimes, more often than we want to admit, the future is saved by hands that everyone else decided weren't worth noticing, by knowledge that everyone else decided didn't count, by people who everyone else decided didn't matter. Jung Eun-woo is alive today because one woman remembered who she was, even when the world told her she was nobody. Even when circumstances tried to erase her identity, reduce her to her labor, define her by her lack rather than her abundance. She remembered. She spoke up. She acted. That's not just a story about childbirth. That's a story about courage. That's a story about dignity. That's a story about all of us, about the knowledge we carry, the worth we possess, the miracles we're capable of when someone finally bothers to see us, to hear us, to let us be who we actually are instead of who circumstances forced us to pretend to be. So don't click away without subscribing. Don't let this story be just another video you watched and forgot. Let it change something. Let it make you look twice at the person cleaning your office, serving your food, delivering your packages. Let it remind you that everyone has a story, has knowledge, has worth that goes deeper than what you can see on the surface. Hit that subscribe button. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And then go out into your world and see people. Really see them. Because you never know when the person you're overlooking might be the one who saves your life.